everyone, and welcome to this episode of Soul Seeds, where my guest expert for today is Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is an author, podcaster, and also the owner of March 4th Media. So, hi, Elizabeth, welcome.
Good morning. How are you? Or good afternoon. Hello.
And the topic we are going to discuss today is fear and self-judgment. So, I would love to know, why are we always so harsh on ourselves and judge ourselves?
Oh, well, um, that's a really good question. But there's, I have found that there are two main reasons.
Mhm,
It's rooted in fear,
mhm,
and then the symptom of that becomes people pleasing and trying to make everybody else happy.
mhm,
And so we land in this cycle of it's not happening, it's not going the way we want it to. And so from there, it's frustrating. And then we start to judge ourselves, and it plays into I'm not good enough, I can't get what I want. And
mhm.
really it's the fear, and then it's also not loving and respecting us ourselves enough to stand up and be seen in authentically in what we want for ourselves.
So it's also related to self-worth, of course.
Yes, 100%.
Mhm. And I know fear can show up in many ways in our daily lives and in how we act and react. So what are some of the ways that you can tell us that fear shows up for us?
Judgment for sure, blame, anger, frustration, stress. Fear shows up, and fear very much likes to mask itself in a way that we don't always recognize.
Yeah, because
Um,
sometimes it can be like a burst of anger, right? So when you actually know, like within like the deeper layer is usually fear.
yes, absolutely. It's the judgment, the blame. That's your fear, and looking at it from the lens, like taking steps back and looking just at the lens of the world we live in, right? Hate,
Mhm.
greed, um, that's all rooted in fear, and the I can't have what I want, so you can't have what you want either. When
Mm.
really the world doesn't work that way. That's
Mhm.
not the way the universe is designed.
Yeah.
We can all have what we want. Um, there's more than enough for everyone.
Mhm.
So that is rooted in fear.
Right. And how can we like step back and take that deeper dive into those feelings and emotions?
So that's the hard part.
Yeah.
That's the challenge. That's where the work begins. I would say there an awareness is the
Mhm.
first step. Like we want to make big changes in the world, right? Like we all know, many of us talk about it. The problems in the world right now are blank. Um, but ultimately, it begins with us individually and being ready to have almost like a radical accountability for ourselves and how we are showing up and the work
Mhm.
that we are doing for us as an individual first, because that sets the tone and the example.
Yeah,
um
because that can spread like an oil almost. Like,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
When you do the
um
work, you inspire others to do the same on their inner shadow, basically.
yes, and it inspires other people. It that doing the work, if you've gone through a dark night of the soul, it it can be a scary and overwhelming process without the guidance to go through it. But when you get to that other side,
Mhm.
that is where there's a lot of we get to choose, right? Like we can then look at it through a different lens, and we get to inspire other people, not from necessarily from even going out and trying to teach what we do. It's more through the example we set in the actions and how we show up in the
Mhm.
world.
Right.
And there is so much power to help others wake up to it
Mhm.
in just doing that. And we think we have to complicate it, and we don't.
Mhm. Yeah, we can just lead by example, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm. And also, I know that fear can be a very tricky feeling, so it can also be like a genuine fear, or it can be like the ego who is trying to keep us in our comfort zone. So how can we distinguish between those two?
So, and it's also a very good question. Fear is always going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think first is the recognition that it's there for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We are biologically hardwired to a degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because way back, there was a reason
Mm-hmm.
that we needed to have that fear for survival. The reality is, right in where we are right now, those same reasons are not there,
Right.
but we need to have that acknowledgement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Accept that fear serves a purpose.
Right.
And moving into today and where we are right now, just the awareness is the first step. I know for me, my fear kicks in and shows up as avoidance.
Mm.
So when I'm being triggered, I want to run like hell.
Mm-hmm.
um, can I say that? Is that okay?
Of course, yeah. I'm Dutch. We swear all the time.
Oh, okay, perfect. Um, so I know that about myself from doing a lot of work and having people in my life that can help me wake up to that and have the
Right.
awareness and being willing to look at my patterns and behaviors.
Mm.
And I know that when there's a couple things that happen when I'm ready to get to the next level, the test will pop up and it's going to trigger that avoidance. And am I going to run or am I going to keep pushing forward?
Mm.
um that is there to make you look and examine
Mm.
and like shine the flashlight on that avoidance for me.
Right.
um and you get to look at it from a greater perspective. So the more, it's like a muscle, the more
Mm-hmm.
you do it, the easier it gets, and the more you're able to spot those triggers and work
Mm.
through it. But this is also where having somebody at your side, marching along with you to coach you
Right.
through it, can be really helpful, because sometimes we need that outside part because we don't want to look like,
Mm.
let's be no, you don't
Yeah.
you don't want to tell
It's not
yourself
fun.
like you're just trying to run away. Like, come on, we don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why it's really helpful to have a coach, a mentor, someone at with you who can gently and lovingly say to you, and sometimes with a kick in the pants, like,
Yeah.
do you realize what you're doing here?
Mm-hmm.
um the other thing is recognize that fear is still going to be there. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we will, I say dance with fear, because it really is like, the more it is a muscle, the more you practice, the more you get familiar with your own patterns and your
Mm-hmm.
own behavior, you will know how to work with it.
Yeah.
So
And navigate that slight fear that is still always there, right?
yes, because every time it's a spiral. Every time you move into the next chapter for your life,
Mm-hmm.
those same triggers are going to pop up.
Right.
They're core wounds. They're going to keep appearing,
Mm-hmm.
but you're looking at them from a different lens. And I know it gets frustrating sometimes because you think like, well, I thought I already worked through all of
I should
this.
be over this by now.
Yeah,
Right.
what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. It's
Mm.
normal. You're just looking at it from a different perspective because you've learned more at this point and you
Mm.
get to go levels deeper.
Right.
So recognize that fear will not go away,
Mm-hmm.
but you can learn to work with it. And it's not a bad thing. It's like that light and dark.
Right.
We're both. So accept the fact that the fear is there for a purpose. It's there to
Mm-hmm.
teach you a lesson. And then ask it, how can you move? How can you work with it and
Yeah.
move to the next
It's
phase?
almost like a dance. You have to learn how to dance with it.
Yes, we're dancing with fear.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been through that process where I dealt with PTSD, and like my fear was just constantly present. And a coach of mine said, well, you have to learn how to thank it. Thank it for being there. Say thank you, but I know you're teaching me something here, but you're not necessary right now. I'm in a safe place. I'm doing well. I'm healthy. Nothing's happening. So thank you, but bye bye.
Yep. And the bye-bye part, like I'm putting you in the back seat. I'm
Mhm.
taking control here.
Yeah.
And this is where the power to pivot comes in because we get to choose every
Mhm.
moment. If
Yeah.
we're aware, like in your situation, you get to choose what you do in that moment. Even
Mm.
if it's just, I'm going to take a deep breath and bring myself back to the present moment.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times that fear comes up from past events that in our life and emotionally, mentally, we go back to that.
Right.
Taking that break and just taking a deep breath
Yeah.
goes
For
a
me, it was
long
also
way.
like so important to incorporate my bodily sensations there because I would instantly tense up when I felt that anxiousness rise. So I'm like, okay, like one of my mantras is like, okay, I'm going to relax, consciously relax. That's the most important part because that gives you your power back. Because I always thought, okay, my anxiety is taking over me, my fear is taking over me. I don't have control over it. But when you realize that, wait, you actually do, that's that's what shifts everything.
Absolutely. We are so much more powerful
Hmm.
than we give ourselves credit for.
Hmm. Yes.
Sometimes it is out of fear, like we're almost afraid of our personal power,
Hmm.
but we have the power to create the life that we want, to feel the way we want to feel. Ultimately, it comes down to us as individuals.
Hmm. And what are some of the most like practical things that people can start with today to overcome that fear and self-judgment?
Breathe,
Hmm.
breathe, breathe, breathe. Get back into your body, come back in the present moment. Even if I want to say meditate, but it's more about mindfulness,
Hmm.
practicing mindfulness, because that's going to help you stay present.
And I would like
Um,
to include bodyfulness as well. I think include your body in those moments as well.
yes, like taking that moment, be aware, like you said, where am I tense right now, and
Right.
trying to work with that. If you can incorporate movement,
Hmm.
it's great. If you're in the line at a grocery store and you're recognizing that you're starting to go to a different place of frustration, of
Hmm.
anger, um, take a deep breath, think about where you're, like, what is going on,
Hmm.
acknowledge it, and just super deep breath and let it go, and bring your awareness to something else that makes you happy, that changes that feeling.
Hmm.
And this is something that I learned when I was on a mountain a couple years back and literally was paralyzed with my own fear.
Hmm.
And I recognized that in the moment, if I just shifted my focus to something else, I was actually able to move through the experience.
Hmm.
So, and that was, sinking deeper into where I was in this park, into the conversation, into singing songs that made me happy, either
Hmm.
out loud or in your head, right? We can choose to do that for ourselves. We don't need permission.
Right.
Um, it doesn't necessarily make the situation stop, right? Like if you're in line at the grocery store, that's a simple, hopefully, unless
Hmm.
it's, holiday season. But um, if it may not solve the problem
Hmm.
when we talk about bigger issues,
Right.
family issues, things like that, but it can make it more manageable
Hmm.
little by little, so that you're giving yourself a break
Right.
from the stress of the experience.
Hmm.
And when you start to do that more and more and more, it lets you take that step back so you can help solve the problems for yourself. Like you will start to see solutions that
Right.
you couldn't see before.
Mm. Yeah, I remember when I had severe anxiety, it was hard for me to go outside. But to me, the outside world felt overwhelming and almost hostile. So when I would go out, I would actually like, I almost hated other people, because I saw them as like my enemies or like everything is just too crowded, too much, too overwhelming. But when I changed that to Like, okay, if I do pass out here, all these people aren't my enemies, but they will probably like help me, because that's the instinct. When you see someone fainting, you want to help them. So when I change that to, okay, it's not hostile, they're not your enemies, but they're your potential friends and helpers, then you give yourself also a break in that mindset, and you can relax a bit more and be like, okay, I will be fine.
Yes, taking control of your thoughts is so important, and having that mindful moment.
Mhm.
One thing I could say, well, okay, two things. One, setting an alarm, like a timer on your
Mhm.
phone to go off periodically throughout the day, and just quick check in with yourself
Right.
can be helpful, just to get you into the practice of
Mhm.
this mindfulness. Like, how am I feeling? What's going on? Maybe just take a deep breath in
Mhm.
that moment and relax for a second.
Mhm.
The other, and I'm a big fan of journaling and writing. Even if you don't think you have something to write about, and
Mhm.
you think you're feeling fine, you can start with, I feel fine. I feel fine. Why am I doing this? I feel
Mhm.
fine. And then eventually your brain's going to pop something out
Yeah.
that you're like, where did that come from?
Mhm.
But there's the muscle, there's that brain body connection when you start to journal, and it will help your brain relax a little bit. You're writing, you don't need to edit it, it's not for anybody else, but it's just going to help you brain dump everything that's spinning in your head, which
Mhm.
also helps bring you back to the present.
Well, thank you so much for this episode, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.